Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to solve the first Rosalind problem. Now, this video is essentially going to consist of me showing you what the Rosalind problem is, how I solved it, and then a really elegant solution that another user of Rosalind submitted in the solution section of the problem. I'll explain what Rosalind is in another video, but this one's just going to all be about this one problem. And if you're in a hurry to understand the solution for some reason, you can find the timestamps of each of those three segments in the description below. So what is the problem we're dealing with today? So today what we want to do is we want to take an input file that has some number of A's, G's, C's, and T's in it, and count each of those letters in the input file, and then give an output that looks something like this, in this order. So why would we ever want to do this as bioinformaticians or as biologists or as computer scientists? If you're in the world of bioinformatics already, you may be familiar with the FASTA format file. And what this is essentially like a text file with one line of metadata denoted by this caret, and then a bunch of subsequent lines that are by custom no longer than 80 characters in length. And they have a bunch of letters, and these letters stand for either amino acids, like in this case, each of these stands for one amino acid in a polypeptide sequence, or they can stand for nucleotide bases. So it's not unrealistic to want to count the number of each of those in a file. Like, for example, there's such a thing as GC content in DNA, and it's an important property of DNA, of genes, for example. So how did I solve it? So I'm using Python 3.8.3 for this particular problem, and the editor that I'm using, if you're interested, is Atom. And Atom is a really great editor, in my opinion. It lets you customize things to your liking, and it works with most languages. So what I do with every script that I write, with every program, is I start with a block comment where I just tell the reader my name, roughly when I began it, and a description of it. Not quite pseudocode, but just a rough description. So I have what I expect the inputs to look like, and then the key purpose of the code, which is in this case to count the number of these 4 letters in the input, and then what I want the output to look like, roughly speaking, so that if I'm in the future coming back to this code after a long time, or if a teammate of mine wants to read this without me standing over their shoulder explaining things, then this would be a quick way to get the idea of what this code should do. Now that's the only documentation that I actually included in this file, which is unusual for me. I usually document files pretty heavily for readability. The only reason I didn't do that here is because it's a pretty short file. I do recommend doing as I say and not as I do in this case, and document your code. You'll thank yourself later. Okay, so the first thing I do on line 10 here is I import sys. This is a package that allows you, the user, to access a variable that I'm interested in that belongs to the interpreter. So this variable is argv. Argv is a list. Argv is a list of arguments, arg, right, that the user of a command line or terminal, passes to Python. So this is basically what I want to do at the end of the day. I want to say, Python, run this program, my Python program.py, and I'm going to pass to you the input text file. That's what I want to do, but in order to do that in a script, in a program, you have to be able to access this string input.txt. Unless you want to hard code it into the code itself, but I don't want to do that. I want this code to be flexible, right? So basically the first item in the list argv is going to be this, your Python program's string name, and then the second one, and then the subsequent ones are going to be your whatever comes after that, in this case the input file. So let's go back to the editor. I do want to kind of step back for a moment and say I wrote this code over a year ago, and this is before I really understood how Rosalind problems worked. I wasn't sure if I was going to get a FASTA-like format, or if I was going to get just one line within the input file. If I was going to get an input file at all, I think. I didn't know. And I also didn't know if they were going to throw me a curveball, like with lowercase a's and uppercase a's. Okay, stepping back to the problem. So we have this variable in-file path, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's the path of the input file that we pass in terminal. That's the way I wanted to do this. I wanted to open files. Okay, so then I have these 4 variables that we want to keep track of before we get into any iterations of the input file. So we're going to initialize these as zeros for now, and they're going to represent the number of total A's in the file, the number of total C's, number of total G's and T's. So then let's go ahead and open the file now that we have these initialized variables. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this keyword with. Now I really like the keyword with because I used to open files just assigning some file name with the function open. And what that got me is a lot of forgetful moments when I would forget to close the file after opening it. And this takes care of that for you. You do have to deal with one more indent in your code, but I think it's worth it. So with, open the file and pass in the pathway. Now you don't have to put R in this case. What it means is read, meaning you're reading the file, not writing it or something else. Or appending it, and it's implied in this function, but I like to put it in there for readability and for consistency. So with open in file path in the read mode as in file, that's going to be our handle or our file object. So now we're in the file, and if you imagine for me a file where there are multiple lines, just like that FASTA file we were just looking at, what you're going to want to do is iterate over those lines by using a for loop. In this case, you're going to say, for line in file, and then I declared these, or I assigned these 4 variables. And you'll see a kind of consistency here, right? Because we're looking for 4 letters that are going to be 4 variables for other operations, that kind of thing. And this is a little lengthy. I probably didn't have to make these 4 variables, but I did. I made them temporarily. So let's go with counting the A's on this line. We say this temporary variable is equal to the sum of this line's number of A's plus this line's number of lowercase a's. Like I said, didn't know if they were going to give me lowercase as well. Now we're using this method called count, and what count will do is count the instances inside an iterable object. It's actually super clever to use count in this case, I think, as I think another user in the Rosalind website pointed out, because count is written within Python as C code. So the method is actually written in C, which is a compiled language. And that's really clever because compiled languages are way more efficient than interpreted languages. So if you had a line that was really, really long and had a ton of characters in it, and you had a lot of lines in your file that you were iterating through, this becomes more and more useful to have a compiled file. Okay, so what a compiled language for the method. What a compiled language does is it takes the code that you and I read, right? And it converts that into machine code, which is way more difficult for you and I to read, but way easier for the computer to read. And so that's where the efficiency comes from. It makes it a lower level language and before it actually runs the code. Okay, so like I said, on each line we count the A's, the C's, the G's, the T's, and then we have these 4 variables to do something with. So remember how we initialized these other ones? Well, now we want to update them with whatever's on each line for every line. So we update the A integer with this operator plus equals. So it means A integer equals A integer plus whatever's in this variable. So after this for loop is done running, each of these variables should represent the number of respective letters inside the entire file. And again, like I said, the file, the file will close after you unindent. And in this case, I think I did this superfluously. I didn't actually need to do this yet, but I printed out to the screen, to the terminal or the command line, a string that was the answer in case I wanted to copy and paste something or just check my work. And what this is a string where you took each of the integers, you created a string from them using the str function, and then you concatenated them with each other and a bunch of spaces in between. So concatenation can be done in Python with the plus symbol. All right, so then the last thing we do is with the same with keyword, we open another file to write it. That's why I put a W here, W-R-I-T-E, write. Name the file. This is going to save to our local directory unless we do some sort of file pathway. And then, you have your handle, and then you output the string that I just described right up here. Okay, so it's not the most elegant or efficient code, but it was very readable, and I think it was a worthwhile to show you guys. Now I want to turn your attention back to Rosalind. So what you can do after you're finished downloading the data set and submitting it to the Rosalind website, and I think after I don't know if it's after the first submission or after you are actually correct, but you eventually will have access to these solutions. And these are from other users who have already completed the Rosalind problem and want to talk about maybe the best way to complete it in their respective languages, maybe the fastest. And I want to draw your attention to one that I've already isolated. This person was very clever. He or she used one line of code to do everything that I just did. But let me unpack this for you because it is pretty involved. But first, I'm going to just show you what it looks like when we use it. This is what we were typing earlier, right? Oh, wait, first. First, oops. Technical difficulties. Okay. First, let's go into Python so that we can use the language. And then type in some number of... So let's just type in that string as if that's our input. Press enter. All right, so it counted 4 A's, 2 C's, 2 G's, and then 2 T's. Yeah. So let's unpack this guy. So we use the print function. That's not anything foreign to us after what we just saw. But this map function is new. So the map function takes 2 arguments. One is an iterable, meaning something that can be iterated over. In this case, it is a string that gets broken down into its substrings or its characters, an A, C, a G, and a T. So basically, it's like you can imagine it like going a for loop over A and then C and then G and T. And each time it iterates over one of these, it says, okay, for A, let's count the number of A's inside the user's input. And then after it does that for each of these, it returns a map object. But the map object can't actually be printed, so you have to, you have to use this asterisk or some other method to turn the map object into a number of, in this case, 4 arguments for the print function. And then the print function will print this out for you with white spaces in between. So that was super clever and elegant, and it was just 1 line of code, and I thought it was worth mentioning. I think this person takes the prize, in my opinion, using Python to solve Rosalind's first problem. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that maybe it inspires you to go out and solve some Rosalind problems of your own. Until the next video,